Yeah, right. I will not drive one of those cars ever. Although sometimes my daughter says, "Daddy, you always let go of the steering wheel because I'm eating a burrito, and so I drive with my knees." So I guess I kind of already do that. But I digress. Anyway, so over the last several weeks, I've had a number of very difficult conversations with folks who are struggling with this very challenging but often necessary process of letting go. And what I'm talking about, what I mean by letting go, is kind of what you saw here in this video. It's those moments that we all face in this life occasionally where we have to let go of something. We have to let go of a relationship. Maybe we have to let go of some offense, or letting go of the past, or letting go of what might have been. So, for example, I have a friend who I've been able to cultivate a friendship with over the internet through the Magician's Forum. It's an online community that I've created and facilitate. It's a friend by the name of Ken who is in the final stages of cancer. And this is a really good Christian man who truly lives out his faith in spite of the pain, in spite of this prospect of leaving the earth at the age of 58. He's been able to maintain his joy and his hope and his courage. It's absolutely amazing. And during our last phone conversation this week, I was trying to express to him how encouraging it's been for me to watch him walk out his faith at such a difficult time. And I told him that I want that kind of faith when it's my turn to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And while he was flattered and encouraged that I felt that way about him, he wanted to let me know that he is still very human and that there is one thing that has been trying to rob him of his peace. He learned recently that his boy, his son, who's not a boy, he's 33, 34, has been making some very poor choices. And because of that, he's having a difficult time letting go of this life when he feels so uncertain about what's going to become of his son. And I can kind of relate to that struggle to a certain degree, though not to that extreme. You know, if you're a parent, you eventually come to realize that as hard as you try, you just can't control the decisions and the choices that your kids make. At some point, you have to let go of whatever little power that you think you might have and allow them to deal with the consequences of their own actions, for better or worse. And it's often painful when it's for worse. It's just not easy. Another example of someone who is having a difficult time letting go of something is a young lady who I've met a couple of times now, who is desperately, very desperately, trying to do everything in her power to reconcile with her husband, who has made it very, very clear that he wants nothing to do with her. In fact, it's very sad because all these ways that she's trying to win back his heart have really only served in pushing him further and further away. And you know, my heart goes out to her. It really does. But at what point does she need to not necessarily throw in the towel or give up, but simply let go and stop trying so hard to manipulate him and the circumstances and leave room for God to enter into that situation and begin to do what only he can do? You know, but of course, that is easier said than done. We all know that life is very complicated. There's a phrase that well-meaning folks, some of you have said it, I know I've said it before too, who will often try to encourage a discouraged friend by saying, you need to just let go and let God. Which to a certain degree, I believe that phrase is true, but what does that even mean? Does that mean that we back off and detach from the situation? Say nothing, do nothing, try as best as possible to not feel anything, and then stand back and allow the chips to fall wherever that they might? I don't believe that's true. And I read an article where this gentleman was trying to communicate the importance of of being still and letting go and allowing God to enter in and address our difficult circumstances. And he uses this passage in the Bible. It's found in Exodus chapter 14. You don't have to turn there. I'm going to read it to you. Beginning at verse 10. Now, very quickly, just to give you some context here for the story, the Israelites have been set free by Pharaoh. And so now they're out of slavery and heading out and into the promised land. Well, Pharaoh has a change of heart, and he decides, actually, I'm going to send 600 chariots to bring these people back into bondage. And that's what he does. And this is where the story picks up. Again, Exodus chapter 14, beginning at verse 10, where it says this. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified, and they cried out to the Lord. And they said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out to Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone. Let us serve the Egyptians. Man, it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die out here in the desert. What a bunch of crybabies, huh? Then he says, Moses, he answered the people. He says, hold on, guys. Don't be afraid. Just stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. Now imagine hearing those words in the midst of your jacked up, tore up situation right now, in the midst of your pain and all the uncertainty. Imagine when someone is coming against you, that you heard those words, from somebody like Moses saying, don't be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians that you see today, you will never see again. Now this is the part I want you to catch. The Lord will fight for you. All you need to do is just be still. You need only be still. Don't do anything. Just let go and let God. Now that sounds awesome. And of course, there are moments when God actually does that. He does all the work. You sit by and you watch. Absolutely. But in my opinion, that's the exception rather than the rule. In fact, it seems like the author of this article that I was reading and referencing here stopped reading a bit too soon. Because listen to what happens here in verse 15. So he says, you guys, you don't have to do anything. Just sit there. Do nothing. And then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. See, Moses assumed, as we all do on occasion, that all that they needed to do was just sit on their duffs and wait for God to do something. Just sit there and let go and let God. But as we just saw here, as we read, God quickly corrected his thinking and said, yes, of course, I am going to deliver you and I'm going to deliver my people, Israel, in a miraculous, incredible way, opening up the Red Sea. But you need to stop crying and whining and complaining about the situation and get up and move out. In this particular case, the thing that the Israelites needed to do in order to experience freedom from the bondage that Pharaoh was trying to keep them in, what they needed to do was let go of their fear. They needed to let go of their doubt. They needed to let go of their whining and complaining and start making their way toward the Red Sea, where, as we know, they would eventually experience deliverance from their enemy. And I believe that that same principle applies to us. What I mean is that sometimes, in order to move forward in life and in order to experience freedom from the circumstances that threaten to keep us bound, there are certain things that we just need to let go of. And then once we finally make that decision to let go of those things, we need to rise up and then start moving and walking in faith. And so for just a bit here, I want to talk about a few things that we would be wise to let go of. Now, I could make this could have been an 8 to 10 week series because there's so many things that we could let go of. But I want to simply focus on 3 things. And these are very elementary. This is not going to be anything new or mind-blowing to you. I will say, though, it's going to be challenging. So while they are elementary things, I believe that it's good for us to return to them because sometimes, we're prone to forget. I'm prone to forget. So if you have a pen, you can write these things down. But the first thing that we need to let go of is control. Now, this is from a website called christiancounseling.com, where they say this: a sure sign that someone is fighting the principle of letting go is the attempt to control. Unhealthy attempts to control occur when we try to exercise authority or power over people, circumstances, or outcomes while not having the authority or power to do so. Now, it's this next statement that's very important. Controlling thoughts and behaviors can often be driven by selfishness, pride, or fear. I want to read that again because that's important here. Whenever you're controlling someone, okay, or controlling thoughts, controlling behaviors, they are often driven by selfishness, pride, and fear. Well, here's the thing. Any behavior driven by selfishness, pride, or fear is sin. And because of that, we really need to be careful not to control people or circumstances, because it can often lead us into dangerous and often sinful territory. See, to control someone is to rob them of freedom and to try to put them in bondage to our selfish desires and our selfish perceived needs. And essentially to make them our puppet. It puts us in the place of God. And so that's a very dangerous thing to do. That's what led to the fall of Satan, right? This devil who wanted to be in the place of God. So again, it's dangerous. So how do we then know if we are being controlled by someone or we are trying to, whether we're being controlled by someone or we are the one trying to control a person? I typed up 3 things. There was a list of 15, I think, but I chose the 3 that I felt were most striking to me. But the first way to know if you're being controlled is that a person will restrict your interactions with someone or with others. What does that mean? It says when your partner limits who or when or where you can talk to other people, they are trying to control you in an unhealthy way. You see, you should have the freedom to have an active social life without being made to feel guilty for talking to others, whether they be of the same sex or the opposite sex. Wow, that's huge. When I was a kid, I was 15, and the young lady who became the mother of my oldest daughter, there was a time when her grandma wanted to take her on a trip to Vermont. And I was a possessive little turd because I was like, well, I don't want you to go to Vermont. I want you to stay here with me. Well, that didn't work out. Thank God that didn't work out. Thank you, Jesus, that didn't work out. But there's a lot of folks who are possessive and controlling. So that's one thing. Okay, on to the second one. Some folks, this is huge. They put conditions on their love. Your partner should give love effortlessly without making rules about whether or not you deserve their affection. When someone uses language like, if you'd only act differently, look differently, be differently, I could love you. Sometimes you don't have to say the words. You can do it through our passive-aggressive actions. When people are doing that, they are putting a limit on their love, and that is an effort to try and control you. Last one. It's quiet up in this Baptist church, huh? They're hostile towards you. Signs of extreme danger, violent actions, threats of violence, threats of punishment are all very concerning signs in a relationship. For the sake of your safety, get to a safe location immediately. A person who uses physical violence to control another person is dangerous to themselves and others. If you are someone who's experiencing that kind of abuse, that degree of control from someone, I have a number up here. You can call this domestic violence hotline. It's all anonymous. It's up there, 800-799-SAFE. I would highly encourage you to get some help. I'll tell you what, we hear from a a lot of young ladies, a lot of women who deal with this here in our community. Get some help. Now look, but on the other hand, if you are someone who is doing that to someone, you're controlling them through abusive behavior, what you need to do is acknowledge that that is a sin. You should not be doing that. It goes against what God wants. So why? Why is that bad? There's a Christian author by the name of Donald Miller. He wrote a book called Blue Like Jazz. Pretty good book. He posted something on Twitter a few years ago that he didn't really elaborate on. He didn't really exactly say what the meaning behind the statement was, and it kind of caused a little bit of a stir. Religious people like to argue about stuff like this. But here's what he said. He suggested that the opposite of love is not hate, it's control. Now think about that for a second. Again, he says the opposite of love is not hate, it's control. Now, I don't think that control, is the exact opposite of love, okay? I don't want to argue about that, but I do think that he's onto something here. Why? I thought about that. Why would control be the opposite of love? I think it's because of this. See, God does not force you and I to love and obey him, because if he did that, it would mean that our love wouldn't come from a willing heart. It would be out of compulsion. We would essentially be like robots who are just programmed and controlled to respond the way that he wants us to. See, but because he loves us, he doesn't control us that way. He gives us the freedom to either love him or resist and reject him. Yes, of course, he wants us to love him. He's given us every reason to love him. He's demonstrated his love to us through Christ, who gave his life for us. So he wants that. But ultimately, the decision is ours to make. And so that's God's heart. So for a Christian woman or a Christian man to try and control someone, it's to act contrary to God's character. And because of that, it's a sinful behavior that we need to remove from our lives. That was the first one. Okay, the second thing. The second thing that I want to talk about that I think really goes hand in hand with this need to let go of control is the need to let go of the outcome. So the reason that we're so often tempted to manipulate people and to manipulate situations is because we want certain things to happen. We want certain goals to be achieved. We want certain expectations to be met. And so we are trying to control the outcome. So the problem is, though, we can't always control the outcome of every situation and circumstance. You can't control what people do or don't do, or their behavior, or whether or not there is or isn't going to be traffic. There's a number of things that you just and I just can't control. And we know that. And in addition to that, many of us know from experience that some of the outcomes that we want are dumb. They're things that aren't even probably good for us. They're things that God knows that we don't really need. And so we know that, and yet how many of us still fall into fear and anxiety and depression about things that are ultimately beyond our control? Is my son or daughter going to grow up to be a success? You really can't control that. And what does success even mean? You define that maybe differently than they do. Where we say, is my spouse, are they going to come back to me? Or whoever it may be, a significant other? Maybe, maybe not. Am I in the next in line to get laid off? And we're consumed with fear. Who knows? Is this round of chemo going to finally be the thing that obliterates this cancer once for all? These are all things that we have no control over of. And so we have to leave the outcome, as difficult as it is, in God's hand and trust that he will do what is best. He will bring about what is most beneficial for us and all parties involved, which is very difficult to do. And that's because we know that while sometimes the outcome is parting of the Red Seas and the destruction of your enemies right before your eyes. Wow, that's awesome when that happens, on the rare occasion that happens. But on the other hand, we also know that at other times, the outcome is the cross. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus cried out to God. And he said these very famous words, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me." And what does he say? "Yet, I want your will to be done, not mine." Isn't he amazing? Jesus, he modeled what it looks like to trust our Heavenly Father to the fullest, to the degree that we believe him enough to leave the outcome in his hands, whatever that may be. Again, that is not an easy thing to do. The reason it's not an easy thing to do is because most of us, by nature, are very, very uncomfortable with uncertainty. I wanted so badly this week to illustrate this point for you by learning how to do a standing back tuck. You know what that is? It's when I would just stand up here and say, "Hold up, guys," and then just flip and land on my feet. Okay, I got that idea in my head on Monday, and I found a YouTube video that said that it can teach me how to do it in 5 minutes, which is a lie, okay? Because I have the bruises to prove it. I was practicing all week doing these drills, getting my, set all tight. Well, anyway, just at the point when I think it was Thursday, I don't remember, Thursday or Friday, as I was starting to figure out how I could dismantle my bed frame so that I can make my mattress into a trampoline, Pastor Zach called me and essentially saved my marriage and my neck by suggesting that we ask Miss Patty from Forest Grove Dance. Are you here, Patty? She's probably not here anyway, but we asked, he said, "Hey, we should ask Miss Patty because she's got this little thing that you put around your waist and you attach it to you, and she has mats. You might want to try it that way, Rudy." I said, okay. So we called Miss Patty, and she was so kind enough to let us do it. So you can see there's a Nutcracker. By the way, buy Nutcracker tickets. It'll be awesome. But this is me just trying to, look, I can get some height. You laugh, but still, because you have to first get that set right. Okay, so I'm good. All right, so then let me try to do a backflip. So then I take a breath, and then let me see, can I get it? And this is with the belt on. Give me a break, Rudy. Boom, no. And they laugh, and Jason makes fun of me. And then I'm getting better, but he falls on me. So we're like the Three Stooges. I think I kind of get it. And the whole time, I'll post it on Facebook so you can hear Patty. She's being such a sweetheart, trying to encourage me to say, "You almost kind of got it a little bit." Anyway, you can shut the thing off. Look it on Facebook. Anyway, what I learned, and the point that I was trying to make in learning this dumb move, which I have not given up, and I will learn it with Miss Patty's help. Thank you, my dear. Anyway, the most difficult thing that I learned about doing a standing back tuck is letting go and blindly throwing yourself into the air. Even with Zach, these two strapping young men holding me, there was a point when I was gonna, jump back, and I stopped. I mean, and I have the things attached to me. I found myself being fearful. The difficult thing about a back tuck is that there's this bridge of uncertainty that you are forced to cross because you can't see where you're going until you get there. I think that's a good spiritual illustration there. See, unfortunately, I wasn't quite ready to cross that bridge of uncertainty, obviously, all right? And you may not quite be ready to cross that bridge of uncertainty when it comes to whatever situation that you are in the middle of. Or letting go is difficult. But the truth that you and I can rest on is that in spite of the fear and in spite of the uncertainty that we may feel, God is working out every situation towards some redemptive outcome. You might not be able to see it. It looks bleak, but he is. And you can bank on that because his word says it. In Romans 8:28, we know that in all things, all of it, in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Whatever the case may be, as difficult as it might be, we need to stop trying to manipulate the situation and people and surrender the outcome to God. Why? So that his good and perfect will can unfold. Praying to the Father, Lord, and this is difficult to do, Lord, your will be done, not mine. It's a hard thing to pray, but it's a necessary thing for us to pray. Okay, last thing. The last thing that we would be wise to let go of is bitterness and unforgiveness. It's hard to forgive folks sometimes. I don't know how, so many of you guys probably saw the Facebook post where some dude was ripping me a new one. Wow. I didn't do nothing to him. He ripped me up and down on Facebook. I did not want to forgive him. I wanted to punch him in the throat if he was near me. I'm just saying, I have feelings too. He was saying, he puts them on there saying, man, I wish UFC could put us together in a match so I could take you. I said, I'm from San Jose, homie. I'll wreck you. And then I thought, that's not a very pastoral thing to say. And he probably might have wrecked me. I'm like, washed up now anyway. I lost my hood creds a long time ago. Oh, Father. But I'll tell you what that gentleman was, how he was coming at me, is nothing compared to what some of you are going through. You've been betrayed by someone who says they're your friend. You have been intentionally robbed of something that is yours. Somebody has taken what is rightfully yours. You have been beat down, neglected, hurt physically, emotionally, mistreated, whatever. Some horrendous things that you all have gone through. And you have the right to feel all of the emotions that are associated with that hurt. You don't need to absolve that person who hurt you from the responsibility. You shouldn't try to pretend that nothing hurtful really happened. A downplay, like, he didn't mean it because he was just angry. He had a rough day at work. Don't do that. It may not even be wise or safe for you to enter back into a relationship with that person who hurt you, okay? So all of that. But with that said, the one thing that you and I must do when folks come at us that way is to forgive. It's not an option. It's a command. It's an expectation as Christ followers. Look at Ephesians chapter 4, verses 31 through 32, where he says, get rid of all bitterness. Let go of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling, slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another. Why? Okay, forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you. This last part is so important for us to remember. Look, God knows your pain. He knows exactly what you have gone through. And here's the great thing. You can trust that he will make sure that those who have intentionally sought out to hurt you and perpetrate frauds on you will have to answer him for their actions, whether it's now in this life or in the life to come when they have to give an account for how they lived. And we will all give an account for how we live. Okay, but that's his job, not ours. Our job is to forgive and let go of bitterness. And see, the Lord is not asking us to do anything that he himself has not done. He forgave those who turned their back on him when he needed them the most. He forgave those who stripped him down and beat him and eventually nailed him to a cross. And he has forgiven you and he has forgiven me for all the things that we have done, the things that have even been hidden from the eyes of others. He sees it all, and yet he still has forgiven us. And what he has commanded us to do is to extend that same forgiveness and the same grace that we have received out to those who have sinned against us, for their sake and for our sake as well. Here's something I know. There are folks right now in this room who are in bondage to the past or some jacked up situation or some destructive cycle of emotions simply because you are refusing to forgive the person or the people who have hurt you. I mean, the person has confessed to you what they've done. They have owned it. They've taken responsibility for it. Maybe they've even paid the price to some degree for their poor choices. And yet, you continue to harbor resentment and anger and hatred and rage and malice toward them. Instead of forgiving them, you're constantly holding their sin over their head, reminding them of the wrong they've done. And I think that's just a very dangerous place for our heart to be. Why? Because in the book of Revelation, the devil is described as the accuser of the brethren. And listen to this. It goes on to say that he, the devil, is the one who accuses them. Who? Us. Accuses them before our God day and night. Now think of this. If Christ came to this earth and died such a horrific death in order that we could be set free from condemnation and guilt and shame, okay? That's his heart. Who are we most like when we hold someone's sin against them? Jesus or the one who is called the accuser? I know that's heavy, and you do want to hold people accountable. Don't mistake what I'm saying here. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. When we refuse to obey the words of Jesus, who said, forgive others in the same way that I have forgiven you, we effectively become a tool in Satan's hand to keep people in bondage to the guilt and the shame and the condemnation that Christ died to set them free from. And that's why it's so important for us to let go of all bitterness. And as we do, a wonderful thing happens. We find that we are the ones who are set free. So I'm going to close this now. Letting go of control, letting go of the outcome, letting go of bitterness and unforgiveness. I know you're probably thinking, man, easier said than done. And I know that. I know it all too well. You know, and that's just 3 things that I mentioned. There's a number of other things that we got to let go of, things that are equally difficult to say, okay, I let go of that. But if we want to move forward in life and to finally move up and out of the jacked up circumstances that you've been in repeatedly and experience freedom and victory and life to its fullest, well then let go we must. Now, knowing when to do that, that can be very challenging. But what I believe and what I hope to kind of impart to you and encourage you to do today, I believe that if we come to God in prayer, in humility, with an honest desire to seek God's will for our lives and for our situation, he'll answer. He loves those kind of prayers. And I want to close by reading to you a prayer that was made very popular by Alcoholics Anonymous. There's some debate on who wrote it. There's a theologian named Reinhold Niebuhr who gets credit. It doesn't matter who wrote it. It's a beautiful prayer that's called the Serenity prayer. To be honest, I'd only ever really heard the first part of it that we all tend to know so well. But I want you to hear the rest of it and take this prayer as your own. I mean, a great start to your journey of letting go is praying out to God this thing here. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I can't change, courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference. It's a part I've always known, but it's this next part I think that's equally beautiful. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking, as he did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will. That is the most difficult part for us. We don't want to surrender to his will. We want what we want. And then we wind up in a jacked up situation. Man, I didn't want look at what I got. And then we're unhappy, finding ourselves in a miserable, jacked up situation or relationship because we wanted what we want. Well, now you got it. How you like that? You don't like it at all. Trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will. I like this part. That I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. I'm going to invite the worship team to come on up here, and we're going to take our offering at this time. If you're visiting for the first time, please don't worry about putting anything in the offering bucket. We ask you put your prayer card in there. Maybe you could let us know that's your first time visiting. We'd like to send you a little note to say thank you for visiting. We know that you could be anywhere this morning and you're here. I'm going to pray here in a moment because I'm hoping that some of you were as challenged as I am and I have been by this message. It's not easy to walk this thing out, and it takes a lifetime to become the kind of person that can really live these things out with consistency. But I'm hoping that today will be the day of someone getting free from a jacked up situation. I believe that today can be the day of salvation and freedom from some of you who are willing to submit yourself to God's will. And so let me pray for you as we prepare to take our offering. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for the way that it challenges us and cuts really to the heart of the matter. And as I prepared these words, I see so many areas where I'm holding on to things, where I'm not letting go, where I'm trying to control, manipulate, both overtly and passive-aggressively. Father, forgive me for that. Thank you that your forgiveness is ready there for me. And thank you for your grace. But I pray for any others here in this room who recognize that they are acting in a way that is not according to your word or your will. That they would have the courage to address that issue and to begin to make changes. Lord, we love you, and we know that you can be trusted. You're a good God. I've seen it in my life. You take jacked up situations and make something good out of them. It's amazing. You're so good at that. So may we believe you for that and walk in the reality of it. I pray in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen.